Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Keep coming in. We have seats. My name is Debbie Bush. I'm with TMT, and I am the Customer Experience Officer and former member of TMT and been with TMT for 7 years. But this isn't about me. I know a lot of you hear my voice on webinars and stuff, but this is about learning more from the expert. It's my pleasure to introduce Dave Murray, who is the VP of Consulting for the DeJulius Group, which is based in Cleveland, Ohio. Beautiful time of year. I say you go, what's their new name? The baseball team? The Guardians? The Guardians, yeah. I was going to say the Indians, but it's the Guardians now. So,
I was at the Guardians game on Friday, Debbie, for opening day, and it was about 38 degrees.
oh,
But today is great in Cleveland, just like it's great here. Thank you, Debbie. Thanks for the introduction. Hi, everybody. As Debbie mentioned, my name is Dave Murray. I'm from the DeJulius Group. A lot of you may have seen my boss, John DeJulius, here at one time or another. What I was asked to do today was give you kind of an overview. So for some of you that have been involved in this in the past, this may be a little bit of a refresher. I'm going to give kind of a high-level overview of the importance of experience. But I've also worked in, hopefully, some tips and tricks that you all can take and maybe build into your experience as soon as you get back to your office to help deliver a better experience. So before I get into that, let me just tell you a quick story. It was 2019, so it was before COVID, and I was at my hometown airport, as Debbie mentioned, I'm from Cleveland, so I was in Cleveland Hopkins Airport. It was 6 in the morning. I was going through security, and I was flying to Denver. I had to speak to a group of physicians later that day in Denver. And since I was speaking to this group of physicians, I had on a suit, I had on one of my favorite ties. I thought I looked pretty good. So I'm going through security, I get through, I take a left in the concourse, and I can start to smell that Dunkin' Donuts, right? I'm thinking to myself, man, this is a 3-hour flight. I would love a large Dunkin'. But at the same time, in my head, I said, you know what? It's 6 in the morning at the airport. There's no way I'm going to be able to get that Dunkin'. That line's going to be crazy. But as I get a little closer, I realize that the line looks more like this particular day. It's still kind of busy, but they're efficient. They're moving quickly. So I'm like, this is my lucky day. I'm getting my large coffee. I'm standing in the line, looking at the menu board, trying to decide if I'm getting anything else, and not really paying attention, and all of a sudden I hear, hey, good morning, sir. What can I get you? And I look down, and there's a young man. He's got his Dunkin' visor on and spiky hair coming over the top. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to take a large coffee. He's like, that's great. Let me get that for you, sir. But before I do, let me ask you a question. Where are you headed today? Because you look sharp. And I say, oh, well, thank you. I'm going to Denver. I have to give a presentation. Ooh, a presentation. Cool, okay. All right, let me get your coffee. So he goes and he does his thing. He makes my coffee. He takes my payment. He comes back with my coffee. And as he hands it to me, he says, sir, I don't know what your presentation's about today, but I do know you're going to kill it. And I grabbed my coffee from him. At that point, I really don't know how to respond. And the first thing that came into my brain was, thanks, Dunkin' guy. And I feel like a complete idiot for calling him Dunkin' guy. And I just walked away. But I get about 30 feet down the concourse. I have to put my coffee down. I take out my phone. I text my wife. I said, the Dunkin' guy just told me I'm going to kill it today. She's like, you are going to kill it today. So I get on that plane. I'm flying 3 hours. Meanwhile, my wife goes to her job, and she starts telling some of our mutual friends at her place of work, hey, guess what the Dunkin' guy said to my husband? Guess what he told Dave? So I'm starting to get texts on the plane. You're going to kill it. I got off that plane in Denver. I was ready to go. I'm like, where is that group? So it's about 2 hours later. I'm about to present to this group. What do you think is the last thing that went through my mind? You would think I was going to kill it, but it's actually, I can't let Dunkin' guy down, right? He set the bar really, really high. But here's why that story is relevant to us today. What Dunkin' guy did for me was he took an everyday run-of-the-mill transaction, one that we all have hundreds of times a day, and by just showing some interest, asking a couple of questions, letting his personality kind of poke through, he took that transaction and he turned it into an interaction, one that I'm still talking about today. So that's going to be a focus of ours. Think about that. Where do your team members have that opportunity to turn a transaction into an interaction that maybe they're not taking advantage of? It's really easy for us to become transactional, right? We're all very busy. We're working down our list of things to do, and some of those outside things disappear, right? We're just focused on that list. So So again, as Debbie mentioned, my name's Dave Murray. I'm the Vice President of Consulting for the DeJulius Group. Quick story about my background that's also kind of relevant for our conversation today. Before I joined the DeJulius Group, I actually worked for my hometown baseball team that Debbie brought up, the Cleveland then Indians, now the Cleveland Guardians. I was there for 12 years. And while I was there, we as an organization realized that we didn't have the best service. We realized that we were a little too reliant on our product. In our case, that was the team on the field, right? Wins and losses kind of drove sales, just like many organizations do, right? A lot of times it's just what customers say about us drives sales. And we realized we weren't doing enough to really try and build a relationship, really connect with our primary stakeholders. So we did some research on who could help us, and that research led us to about 6 miles away from the ballpark to the DeJulius Group and John DeJulius. So I literally was the project lead focusing on what we could do with the Cleveland Indians to build a better relationship with our season ticket holders and our suite holders, and really all of our fans. So that's a thing to be thinking about. Are you sometimes too reliant on your product and not focused enough on the experience or the relationships that you're building around it? Another previous position I had too, I used to work for the Boston Bruins, the record-setting Boston Bruins. Any hockey fans? Yeah. That's actually me. I'm dressed as Blades the Bruin. Now here's the thing about this picture. My job title when I was there was promotions manager. Nowhere in my job description did it say dress up as the mascot, right? We had interns that did that job. But for some reason this particular day, there were no interns in the building. I can't remember if there were finals going on or a big keg party the night before, but there were no interns. Somebody had to dress up as Blades the Bruin and drive up to Peabody, Massachusetts and high-five kids in a Dunkin' Donuts. It happened to be me. And then I realized after the fact that this was on my job description, right? It was other duties as assigned that we all have. Here's the thing. Here's why that's relevant to us. I am a firm believer that every job description anywhere across any organization should have customer service on the job description. It doesn't matter if you're in accounting, finance, if you're technical, we all are responsible for customer service. We all play a role in it some way. But a lot of times we do a poor job as organizations to explain that to our team members. Right? So think about that too. Do you have people in your organization that do not realize the impact they have on the customer experience? If we don't do a really good job of explaining that to them, sometimes that happens if we're not careful. So the title of our session today, Delivering a World-Class Client Experience. And I want to give you, as I mentioned, some tidbits on what you can do to do just that. For us, and you may have heard this before, for those of you that have seen John speak, it starts with service aptitude. Service aptitude. Do you have service training with your organization? Well, now, members of this great organization, you've been given some, right? We've created some as part of your affiliation with this group. So there's some that exist. But service aptitude is so important. It reminds me of this quote from Walt Disney. Maybe you heard before when Walt said, "We don't put our people in Disney, we put Disney in our people." Think about that for a moment. Does Orlando, Florida have 50,000 residents that are just naturally born servers, and so they get this great pool of people? No, it's what they do with their 50,000 cast members once they get them. And in their case, they make sure that no one ever has the opportunity to be in front of a customer before they go through their customer training. They understand what it looks like. But what happens out there in most organizations, and maybe in your organization? Someone gets hired because we kind of desperately need people, right? And so it's your first day on the job. Hey, you know what? Normally we'd have some training for you, but we're a little backed up, so we're just going to have you work this register, right? And if you have any questions, let us know. And then we'll do your customer service training maybe next week. And then that never comes, right? It happens all the time in organizations. So we have a definition of service aptitude. We say it's a person's ability to recognize opportunities to meet and then exceed a customer's expectations, regardless of the circumstances. Just a quick footnote here, on the bottom of the slides, whenever there's a page number, if you are using the digital workbook, these are in there. There's some things to follow along, if you so choose. You don't have to. Just a guide for you if you want to use it. So let's talk about this definition. Meet expectations. Do all of your team members know what it looks like to meet their customers' expectations? Maybe we need to take that a step backwards so they know who their customers are. Right? Sometimes it's real easy to identify our customers as end users, but there are probably some other customers along the way or other stakeholders along the way that maybe we don't view as customers. A lot of times we have internal customers that we forget are actually customers. Right? It's just Bob down the hall, and Bob's such a pain. Right? It happens all the time if we're not careful. So does your team know how to meet those expectations? And then do they know how they can exceed those expectations? And this is really important because exceeding expectations, going a little above and beyond, it doesn't always have to be giving something away for free. Sometimes it's just a little extra time, attention, information, expertise that you're sharing based on the situation your customer's in. But the reason that one's so important to define is because if it's not defined, the waters get a little murky there. Think about it. For every one person on your staff that would naturally go above and beyond for a customer and give an extra hand and make sure they have everything they need, for every one person you have, you probably can think of a couple that wouldn't do that. And it's not because they're bad people or bad employees. They were just never trained to think that way. Right? So again, we need to deliver a roadmap so we have that consistency of what it looks like, and we know our team members know what they can do to deliver that experience. The last piece of this definition is regardless of the circumstances. Regardless of the circumstances is all about all those things that are going on right now. Right? So we could probably say regardless of blank and plug so many things in, right? Regardless of staffing, regardless of turnover, regardless of the busyness factor, right? Everyone's so busy. Whatever that is, there's always a lot of regardlesses out there. But here's the thing. When it comes to our experience, we have to make sure our team members know we can't mail it in. Right? We can't have two people call off on a Wednesday and say, oh, okay, good, we're a little short-staffed. Forget all the customer service stuff today. Right? Let's just get through this. Right? That's not how we want to operate, but that's what happens in a lot of organizations if we don't have the proper framework in place. So something to be thinking about. Here's the other reality that we're all kind of experiencing right now. We are in a recession. Not an economic recession, although we've kind of been teetering and going back and forth. We are in a recession. We are in a customer service recession as an economy. Right? There's a group that studies these things and studies customer satisfaction. And customer satisfaction has been declining steadily for years. As a matter of fact, at the end of 2022, it started to make a little peak back up, but it was close to its all-time low. So some of you may be thinking, well, that's not good news. And as consumers, it's not good news. But as service providers, as business owners, that's great news. Right? That's opportunity. That's an opportunity to stand out, to use your customer experience to focus on building those relationships, to differentiate yourselves from competitors. It's truly an opportunity. Right? So right now, it is at a 15-year low, and it's starting to come back slowly, but very slowly. Here's the other thing to be thinking about why it's so important to focus on service right now. Since the pandemic, there's been some studies done. So since 2020, the pandemic, 80% of consumers are reporting they will now go to someone else after one bad experience. All right, you drop the ball on me once, maybe you don't fix it, don't get back to me, I'm out of here. All right, so customer loyalty is also at a low. Also, same study said that 48% would rather go to the dentist than call a customer support team. Wow. I guess that one kind of makes sense. So things that we need to be thinking about and why it's so important to focus on these things right now. So in your world, right, with a lot of technical folks, this one sometimes applies. So I'm going to share a video with you. I want you to think about this back in your particular office. Before I share the video, though, just a quick setup. Has anyone ever flown Spirit Airlines?
I've been warned not to.
So yeah, usually when I ask that question, I hear someone say, yeah, once, never again. Or like you said, someone told me not to. Let's watch this quick video from a couple years back, and then we'll discuss.
The CEO of Spirit Airlines defending his company today amid backlash over its refusal to reimburse a dying Vietnam veteran. 76-year-old Jerry Meekins has terminal cancer. When doctors told him you can't fly, he tried to get a refund on his $197 ticket that he'd already bought. It was a non-refundable ticket. Spirit, of course, said, no, it's non-refundable. I don't care if you're dying. We're not refunding it. That triggered a bit of public outrage and calls for a boycott. The CEO says the former Marine should have bought insurance. By the way, U.S. Department of Transportation reports Spirit is the most complained about airline in the United States. Twice as many complaints as the second most complained about airline, United. The Spirit CEO says that is irrelevant.
That is irrelevant. So that story took place about 2017 or so. There's a couple of things to talk about in that, if we unpack it a little bit. First of all, the most complained about airline in the United States. That's really saying something, right? Especially when you think about it this way. If you go to airports a lot, you might notice that Spirit doesn't have a ton of flights out there compared to, I'm going to guess that Southwest Airlines probably has more daily flights out of Nashville alone than Spirit has across the country. Yet here, they are the most complained about. It's almost like they're working at it. It's almost like it was their goal for the year. But here's the thing that I really want to unpack from that story. Think about this for a moment. So Jerry Meekins gets this diagnosis. He learns that he has this illness. He can't fly. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm going to assume that he picked up the phone. When he realized he couldn't fly, he picked up the phone, called one of their contact centers somewhere, and he's explaining this to one of their contact representatives. Put yourselves in the shoes of that Spirit contact representative and think about this. When he says, I can't fly, doctor's orders, you say, sorry, can't help you. Why do you think that is? Yes, who said that? Nice work. Policy. And that's why I wanted you all to think about it, especially in your businesses, in your line of work. Policy can really get in the way of the experience. I'm not talking about those rules and regulations. We need them, right? But the word itself, policy, can be a stop sign. Sorry, that's our policy. I can't help you. That's our policy. You're still here. I don't know why. I can't help you. It's our policy. Right? So we recommend getting rid of the word policy, not the rules and regulations, right? We need those. But instead, look at them as guidelines. Because there are going to be some times where if we are creative, we can't come up with a solution. But if you look at your business, there's probably a lot of times where there might be a solution somewhere, but we're saying, policy, can't help you, and we're moving on, right? It might be happening a little more often in your business than you think and you'd like it to. So that's one thing I'd like you to take back and think about. Do we sometimes have places where we're hiding behind policy? So I got a quick study for you. I want to take a little survey of the room. If I were to ask you, by a show of hands, about your organization, if I said, who in here provides superior service to your customers 100% of the time, raise your hand. 100% of the time. Wow. All right, tough group. What if I said 80% of the time? We provide superior service 80% of the time. Okay. Okay, more hands. Good, good. I believe you. I believe you. Do I have to say 60? 60% of the time? 60, 40? Okay, so we're in the 60 to 80 range. So here's why I asked that question. Bain & Company, the great research firm based in Boston, did this study a few years ago. And so what they did was they identified CEOs of 300 organizations. And they said, hey, Ms. or Mr. CEO, same question. What percentage of the time are you providing superior service to your customers? And so the CEOs responded. Bain crunched all the data and came back at 80%, a lot like a lot of you in this room. What the CEOs did not know was at the same time, Bain had identified 3,000 customers of those organizations and asked the same question. Hey, Ms. or hey, Mr. Customer, what percentage of the time do you think you're receiving superior service? Anyone want to take a guess at what the customer's number came back as? 20? 15. Yeah, someone knows. Yes, you are correct. 8%. So for those of you that have not seen that statistic before, the initial reaction is like, holy cow, how could that happen? You know, there's a lot of reasons how that happens, right? We could spend the rest of our time today debating why, right? The definition of superior. How are we treating our customers? The bosses aren't our customer necessarily, so they don't really understand the experience we're delivering. There's so many reasons why that huge gap exists. But it's a great reminder to us, for all of you and your businesses, that at the end of the day, we're in the customer perception business. Right? We can sit around in a room, talk about how we love our customers, how important they are, all these things that we want to do, right? You know, we as humans kind of gauge ourselves on our intentions, not necessarily results. So we can say all these great things we want to do, but if they're not actually providing that perception, providing those results, they're not going to get us very far. And one of the main reasons that gap is so large is very often we're lacking compassion and empathy. Right? A lot of times, our team members, whoever it is, whoever's out there providing the service, hasn't been the customer or hasn't been the customer in a long, long time. And they forget what it is they go through. They forget some of the things they have to deal with. In the case of the Bain study, right, a lot of those CEOs haven't been a customer of theirs, kind of going through a drive-through or whatever it is that they do. Right? That happens. We have to be really, really careful about making sure it's our jobs to make sure that our team members are empathetic and are feeling that empathy. We have to instill that over and over. We work a lot right now in healthcare, and empathy fatigue is a real thing. Right? If I hear the same story over and over, even though it's a tugging at the heartstrings, a sad story, I start to become numb to it over and over and over. Same thing happens in call centers, right? If I hear the same complaint over and over and over, you're just a number. Right? I'm not giving you the same level of service because you're just a number to me now. So how do we instill that empathy? What can we be doing? So here's another thing that I want you to maybe take away. This could be an exercise to do with your teams if you haven't done this, or even if you've done it recently, not too recently. This is something that I recommend organizations look at once a quarter, maybe twice a year. It's a great exercise. We call it negative cues. Here's the thing about negative cues. Negative cues can exist everywhere. They can be in the words that we use. They could be in signage. They could be in our body language, that sigh when a customer comes up, right? Whatever that is. So let me give you some examples. Here's some verbal negative cues. You need to verify your information. Right? Maybe you called your insurance provider recently and that's what you were met with. You need to provide or to verify your information. Now, if I change one word in this, if I change verify to confirm, it changes slightly, ever so slightly. If I change one more word though, if I change you to we, I've taken a statement that started out a little bit accusatory, you need to verify, and now I've made it one where I'm advocating for you. We just need to confirm this, and then we will get you to the right department. We will answer your question, whatever it will finish your purchase, whatever that is. Now, I'm not standing here saying that you need to go back and script all your people. I don't want that. I want you to hire great people and have their personalities come through. But sometimes we have to take the time to build awareness of where we have bad habits of negative cues that have built up over time, and then look to focus on removing those or replacing them with something else. Here's the other thing about negative cues that's really, really interesting and why I would encourage you to take this back with your teams and focus on it. So this sign, we've seen it everywhere, right? You're required by law to have this sign in your restroom if you serve food or beverage, right? It's a requirement by law. However, if I walked into this quick service restaurant's bathroom and I saw they had 1, 2, 3, 4 signs in that tiny little bathroom telling their employees to wash their hands, I might think they have a problem. I might just walk out even though I've already paid for my order. But here's why negative cues are so important. Employees go into that bathroom multiple times a day, use the facilities, hopefully wash their hands, and then walk out. And what happens is those signs kind of become like artwork on the wall. They just start to blend in. Meanwhile, a first-time customer might walk in there and say, holy cow, what's going on here? And that's why focusing on negative cues is so important, because these things do blend into the woodwork, right, for employees. So the process of going through your negative cues is literally looking at your experience through your customer's lens, not your typical company owner or employee lens, because it's a much different view. And you'll find some things out there that are going to come across as negative. They're going to deliver a poor experience. Unintentionally, but they exist. Here's some other examples. Here's a store I'm not going to go into. This park looks no fun at all. And here's one, technology is so important, but as technology continues to grow, some negative cues grow as well. This is a physical therapy company. Now, here's the deal. When you go to check in here, you're supposed to use the iPad, right? See that little blue thing? So the woman behind the counter, she doesn't even check people in anymore. Everything's moved to the iPad. Go to the iPad. Don't come to where you used to check in. Go to the iPad. But here's the thing. There's a percentage of customers that don't know how to use the iPad, don't like the iPad, have questions. So they still go to the counter. But in the meantime, they've given her some other responsibilities. They've literally built a barrier between her and the customers that still need help. Again, a lot of times these are unintentional. They come from a place, maybe we're trying to be more efficient, whatever that looks like, but we're not thinking and looking through that customer's lens. It can be so important for us to focus on. Another thing that I want to share with you is setting expectations. So think about this for a minute. I mentioned we work with a lot of hospitals, working with one hospital system in Florida, and this was a common scenario. You went to the hospital, they took great care of you, they made you feel wonderful, the nursing staff was amazing, the docs were great. Your last day there, a nurse or a doctor comes in at 7 a.m. and says, hey, good news, you're out of here today. And you're like, oh, thank God, awesome, right? So maybe you text your spouse and you're thinking, I'm out of here by 10, maybe 11, I'm home for lunch. What they didn't tell you was it takes about 8 to 10 hours to actually get you out of the building. The reality is you're going to be lucky to be home for dinner. But they were leaving that part out, right? So all of a sudden, what was really a nice day, you saved me, you made me feel great, all of a sudden it turned into a customer satisfaction nightmare. And their scores were going down the tubes, and they were able to realize it was basically because of this last day experience. And it basically came down to us just not telling you how this was going to go. It was that simple. So a lot of times, if we're not careful, we have areas where we are not properly setting expectations. I love this example. If you've been to the Dallas airport recently, they set expectations really well. There's 5 stalls available here, and the next bathroom is just 2 minutes away. But seriously, think about that. Where might you have expectations that your team's just not doing a good job setting? And again, no fault of their own. A lot of times we make assumptions. We assume the next team's going to share that, right? Or that the sales guys tell them that, or the service people take care of that, whatever that is in your world. We kind of assume it's going to happen somewhere, and if we're not careful, it happens nowhere, right? No one's doing it. Maybe it's a difficult conversation that people tend to avoid and would rather not have. And we all know that those difficult conversations, if we don't kind of attack them in the moment, they can just get bigger and bigger and bigger and then turn into a really horrible experience and potentially losing a customer. So it's really, really important when it comes to setting those expectations. So I would encourage you to think about that. Where do you have an opportunity to be better at setting expectations? So a couple of homework items for you so far, going back and really looking for your negative cues, having some of your team members look for them, identify them, maybe even look to maybe eliminate some of them. Can't eliminate all of them, but you can maybe lessen them from happening. And then where can we be better at setting expectations? Here's another thing about setting expectations. If you look at what your primary complaints are, if you work backwards, if you go backwards a couple of weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks backwards, oftentimes you will find a place where maybe we could have done something, set expectations, told the customer something that would have prevented that complaint from ever materializing, right? So that might be something you want to look at too as part of this exercise. Then the other thing I wanted to share with you today is building relationships and building trust with our customers, right? That was one of the focuses in our session title, right? How do we build those raving fans? How do we get people that are going to stick with us, give us the benefit of the doubt, show us that loyalty? Here's one of the ways that we do it, and this is an important way. We want to build trust and create relationships. So for those of you that have seen John here before, you might know this acronym I'm about to share. Some of you, it might be new for you. Does anyone know what this acronym stands for? FORD? Not fix or repair daily. not found on road debt. I hear those all the time. They're very good, and they are, technically correct, but they're not the ones that we're looking for when we talk about Ford. Yes, sir?
Family, occupation, recreation, dreams.
You are correct. He said it stands for family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. Who thinks they know, why do we care about that? Scott.
Because we want to engage and build relationships with our customers, and falling in of these would put us down that track.
Yes, what Scott said was we want to engage with and we want to build relationships with our customers. And Scott is absolutely right. The reason that we focus on Ford is because the Ford type information, family, occupation, recreation, and dreams, is the type of information that's most important to us as humans. It's what we are most passionate about, right? Think about it. If you wanted me to talk about my 3 kids for the next time we have remaining, 15 minutes or so, I could do that. As a matter of fact, my oldest daughter is in the back of the room today. Occupation. If you go to a barbecue for the first time and meet someone for the first time, what usually comes up first? What do you do, right? It's how we identify ourselves. The last 2, recreation and dreams, is how we spend our discretionary income and time. So the things that we are most passionate about. So there is some science that tells us that when we are focused on Ford, we are able to build better relationships, and we're able to build those relationships faster when we're utilizing Ford information. So let me give you an example. We work with the Maids International. They clean homes across North America. They had an existing quote sheet. So if you call the maids and say, hey, I'd like you to come clean my house, what's it going to cost? They have a bunch of questions they have to ask you. How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, how many ceiling fans, et cetera, et cetera. And they wound up putting that Ford right on the quote sheet. Here's why. I'm going to share a quick video, and then we'll discuss why it's relevant.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
It's easy to miss something you're not looking for. Now that video's been around for several years now. I'm sure many of you have seen it before in presentations or workshops. It was a very clever ad that was developed in the UK to remind people it was springtime and motorcycles are going to be on the road, right? So look twice. It's easy to miss something you're not looking for. What the message it sends to us, the importance for us, is it reminds us that we're not very good multitaskers, right? If you're around my age, I graduated college in the mid-90s. When I graduated college, that went on our resume, right? Great multitasker. Right? I don't know, it was just like a buzzword that everyone used. I really didn't even know what it meant. But as humans, our brains aren't really conditioned for multitasking, right? We usually just do many things okay, as opposed to 1 or 2 things very well. So it's a reminder, that video gave you a job to do, count the passes. And while you were counting the passes, other things were happening, and because you were focused on that task at hand, you missed some of the other things that were going on. I was just in a workshop yesterday in Massachusetts, and someone actually said to me, play that video again. I don't think that bear was there the first time. He was there both times, I assure you of that. But that's why the maids put Ford right on their quote sheet, because they knew we're asking our team members to ask all these questions and get these answers. And as they were doing that, some other great information was coming their way, helpful information to build a great relationship with this prospect, to really make a positive impact the first time we go to their home. Things like, oh, you know what? We have 4 bedrooms now, I forgot. We just converted the office into a nursery. We're expecting in August, right? A lot of times before they were focused on forward, that information would go right over someone's head. They'd be like, okay, 4 bedrooms. Now they're able to notate that and make sure when that crew of maids goes into that house the first time, they have a card or some little thing that they give for an expectant family. Right? So it's an opportunity to really focus. Here's the other thing about forward, though, just so you're aware. It's not an interrogation. Right? You don't go back and say, everyone, hey, team, come here, come on. Here's the thing. We're going to really focus on forward. Starting tomorrow, ask all these questions. Right? Forward are things that come up in our natural conversations. It's really an exercise in making sure that we are actively listening, that we're not getting bogged down in just what I have to do, and I'm listening to the other information that's being told to me as well. So it's really an exercise in making sure our team members are actively listening, grabbing that information that's good, and using it in the moment to build rapport, or maybe it's good information that I shared with someone else on my team so they can bring that up or follow up on that later, right? Whatever you decide, how you use that information. But it's not an interrogation, it's a conversation. It's making sure that we're focused on being in that conversation, being in the moment. So what does that look like in your world? Where can that exist? You know, technology, again, changed our world with the pandemic. There's forward in Zoom, right? A lot of times people have a backdrop that's their favorite place on earth, their favorite vacation spot. Or you're watching, you're in a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, you see someone has their running medals hanging behind them. So much great information out there. It doesn't even have to be face-to-face. A lot of our interactions aren't as much face-to-face as they once were. So what does collecting forward look like for you? Sometimes it's even in emails, right? It's reading what's in the email outside of just what the request is. I need this. But sometimes it's for the why, the what, that's also in that email. So be thinking about that. Here's something else that's really interesting about forward, and another reason that we advocate that you focus on gathering forward and focus on building those relationships. Here's the thing. There was a study done. Daniel Pink wrote about this in his book, A Whole New Mind, if anyone is a Daniel Pink fan or if you read that book. There was a study done. Scientists studied a group of radiologists. So what they did was they got these radiologists together and they split them randomly into 2 groups. Okay? Group A was given x-rays, asked to review those x-rays, and submit their reports, and they did just that. Group B was given the exact same x-rays, but this time in the envelope with each x-ray, there was a picture of the corresponding patient, and there was a write-up on them. There was a backstory that, she's a grandmother of 12, or he's a young father that just got a really lousy diagnosis, whatever it was. So here's the thing. When the scientists studied what the radiologists did, Group B actually spent more time reviewing the x-rays than Group A did. And when Group B submitted their reports, they were on average 3 times longer than Group A. So the results of the study found that when we have that forward knowledge, when we have that connection, we also advocate for that customer more. So think about that. Wouldn't you want all your team members out there advocating for your customers on a regular basis as opposed to just getting a job done for them? But instead, you're making sure they're advocating and making sure that it's exactly what they want and they have a full understanding, the full knowledge. Right? So forward, it's really a two-way street. It not only helps us build those better relationships, but it also helps us advocate for who it is that we're working with and for. So there's some real value there. So the other thing that I wanted to share with you today, when we work with companies and we roll things out, a lot of times we get pushback. What do you think the biggest piece of pushback we get when we talk about focusing on forward or taking some time to look through our negative cues? What do you think the biggest pushback is? Yeah, who's got time for that, man? Who's got time, right? So there's a Harvard Business Review, a brand new edition came out. I haven't read it yet. It's called The Busyness Trap, right? We're all so busy. But here's the thing. What we're talking about, some of these things, if we're building better relationships with our customers, if we're investing the time now to build a better relationship, what does that mean for us in the future? Right? What work does that take away in the future? right? Maybe it solves some of the problems that we're dealing with right now, some of the complaints we're dealing with right now. Maybe it solves some of the sales that we have to do because we're retaining more of our existing client base because of the focus, right? I share that with you because there's a light at the end of the tunnel of this, right? When you hear that, we're too busy, the busyness factor, there's really a light at the end of the tunnel, and it proves results. Here's the other thing. To really focus on being experiential, delivering a better experience, sometimes it's just so easy, right? To deliver a better experience, sometimes it's as little as reminding your team members, them remembering to smile. Even if they're phone-based, as cliche as it is, we know how important that smile is on the other end of the phone. We've all been there where we felt that smile on the other end, and we've been there when we know there was no smile at the other end, right? Using that customer's name 2 or 3 times once we have it. It's such a great way to build rapport. It doesn't add to the time. You can't say, I'm too busy to use that person's name. You kidding me? I got to get this sentence out and move on, right? So using names, making sure that they're minding their tone. Again, it goes back into being transactional. How I shared with the Duncan guy story, he wasn't transactional. He was focused in the moment. He was energetic, right? But we have to remind our team members to do that sometime, each and every customer. It's easy to fall in that trap. Warm transfer, do you have any information? You know, we think about call centers mostly when we hear warm transfers versus cold transfers. But it's not always in a call center or a contact center environment. Whenever a customer would have to repeat themselves on information they've already given us, that's a misstep on our part, right? We could have, should have delivered that information internally somehow, right? So think about the areas where you may have cold transfers, where you could have warm transfers to make sure that your team members are prepared and set up for success to deliver a great experience to your customers. A proper thank you, that gets missed so much these days for whatever reason. I think it falls under the busyness category. But are we thanking our customers enough for being customers? Kind of a basic thought and maybe something to think about. And then as we talked about, utilizing Ford. So another exercise that you can take back to your teams is where can you be better at obtaining and then utilizing Ford? Maybe there's some places that stick out to you in certain conversations or when you go to a customer's office, whatever that means, whatever that looks like in your world, where can we be better at Ford? So kind of in closing here, because we only have about 2 minutes left, what I want you to do, what I'd like everyone to do is think about what's your action plan? Where can you start? So we talked about negative cues. We talked about employing Ford and focusing on Ford. We talked about setting expectations and making sure that we're doing that wherever we can. I'd like all of you to think about, is there an area where I can go back to the office? You guys are back, Monday next week? You're not back, you're here the rest of the week, I think. So I go back to my office on Monday. What can I do? Where do I start? I'd like you to have that in mind. What does that look like to me so I can go back? Because a lot of these things, as small as they are, if you go back and talk about them with your teams and start to focus on these with your teams, you can really provide an immediate impact. You can boost your experience almost immediately out of the gates by just some simple focus, making sure that your teams have that focus and that understanding. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for coming to the session today. It was great to see you here. It's great to have a full room because you all know how important the experience is. I hope you got a tip or a trick that you could take back and start to utilize right away. Oh, one other thing too, you can connect with me utilizing that QR code. So if you want to ask a question, send me an email, whatever that may be, please feel free. That's my information. And thank you all for being here and enjoy the rest of the conference.